The late afternoon light glinted off sleek sedan hoods and the polished brass of streetcar rails as Officer Lewis Carter eased his patrol car into the stream of traffic. He'd spent 20-plus years reading brake lights and steering angles hunting odd drivers. Today his gaze fixed on a black SUV gliding just below the posted speed too slow for his taste, too expensive for his complacency. With a flick of his wrist, he flipped on lights and siren cutting through the bustle like a warning shot. Before we continue, we'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us get closer to 1,000 subscribers. It means the world to us. Thank you so much. Inside that SUV sat a woman who did not flinch. Navy blue suit, immaculate hair, neatly coiled. She tapped the wheel with calm precision as she edged to the curb. This was business as usual for her, though she'd steeled herself for every derogatory thought that might cross his mind. Her eyes remained forward until the patrolman's boot struck asphalt. Then she turned and offered a polite nod. "License and registration," he barked, leaning into the open window with badge catching the sun. His voice carried the weight of years on the force, cynical, impatient, hungry for compliance. She slid her documents into his view, a standard driver's license, then something he did not expect, a clipped corner of a federal credential peeking out from her wallet. Carter's lip curled. "Just your paperwork," he spat, snatching the folder and slamming it against the cruiser's hood. He didn't bother to glance at the badge. In his world, a black woman in a luxury car was guilty until proven innocent. Inside the thrum of city noise, jackhammers, car horns, passing conversations, his prejudice poured through every step he took away from her window. He typed her plate into the console, muttering about big-shot wannabes, unaware that with each keystroke, he'd triggered a tempest far bigger than his routine stop. The SUV sat idling at the curb while Officer Carter's dark patrol car glowed with reflected brake lights. From her seat, Simone Blake watched his broad shoulders stiffen every time he punched a new query into the console. The street around her buzzed on sidewalk vendors, shouting tourists, clicking cameras, yet behind the tinted glass, she felt the weight of his scrutiny like a physical force. Minutes later, a second cruiser rolled up, and a younger officer climbed out, hands trembling as he approached. His starched uniform still bore the crisp crease of the academy, his face pale under the brim of his cap. "Hey, Lewis," he whispered, glancing from Simone's SUV to his senior partner. "You sure we have probable cause she's not doing anything illegal?" Carter shot him a look that could freeze traffic. "Probable cause badge could be phony," he snarled. "Let's dig deeper." His words fell like a gauntlet. The rookie swallowed, nodding mutely, eyes flicking to Simone's calm profile. Simone's jaw clenched. She knew this playbook well. Every exaggerated hunch, every minor infraction magnified into justification for escalation. She slipped the FBI credential back into her pocket, resisting the urge to roll down her window and demand respect. Instead, she leaned back silent and steady, a still point amid his brewing storm. Carter stomped to her door and rapped his knuckles sharply. "Step out," he ordered, as if reciting routine lines. The younger officer hovered behind him, face pinched with guilt. Simone exhaled, her voice cool and measured. "Officer, I'll cooperate, but I'm recording this on federal authority." At the mention of federal, Carter blinked, but caught himself mid-step. He waved a dismissive hand. "Sure, whatever you say." He turned to bark orders at the rookie, but the younger man hesitated, uncertain which side of the law he stood on. The tension crackled across the pavement. In that pregnant pause, Simone knew the real fight was just beginning, and that her quiet resolve held more power than Carter's misguided bravado. Simone Blake's hand never wavered as she slid her phone into speaker mode. The street noise, the rattle of buses, the shout of vendors, the heels of pedestrians faded into background static. Officer Carter's swagger stuttered when she spoke into the mic. "This is Special Agent Reed. I'm being unlawfully detained at 5th and Monroe. I need immediate assistance." His jaw dropped as the unmistakable click of the Department of Justice line crackled through her open window. "Back up is ETA 5 minutes," a calm voice announced. The sidewalk crowd, already buzzing with curiosity, fell into a stunned silence. Tourists, office workers, even stray cyclists paused mid-step. They had stumbled into something far bigger than a routine traffic stop. The rookie officer straightened, relief washing over his features. He met Carter's glare with a quiet nod, as if vindication pulsed between them. Carter, on the other hand, looked suddenly exposed, no longer the town's tough cop swinging a badge at anyone who rattled his bias. He fumbled for words, his earlier confidence draining into the asphalt. Simone held the credential clipped inside her blazer with unconcealed firmness. "I'll remain here," she continued, voice level but unmistakably firm. "I expect to be treated with the respect due my office." A hush swept the gathered onlookers. Some raised their phones, others exchanged whispers about FBI and unlawful detention. Carter's cheeks reddened under his cap. He opened his mouth, fingers twitching as though to bark another order, but the reality settled over him like cold rain. He had mistaken a federal agent for an easy target. Now camera crews and social media snoops would descend, amplifying every misstep. The rookie took a small step back, uncertainty etched in his posture. He glanced at Carter, then at Simone, then at the gathering crowd. Carter's bravado dissolved into grim resignation. In those 5 pending minutes before federal agents arrived, the power dynamic had flipped utterly. Simone remained seated calm as a still lake, knowing the storm she'd summoned would wash away the arrogance lingering in Carter's patrol car. Sirens sliced through the midday bustle as a sleek state police cruiser and 2 unmarked black SUVs coasted to a stop. Lewis Carter's posture went rigid. He slammed the driver's side door and barked, "Step out of the vehicle now." Simone Blake moved with unhurried precision, releasing her seatbelt, smoothing her navy blazer, and placing a single heel on the pavement. "Special Agent FBI," she declared, voice carrying over the engine hum. Carter's lips curled into a sneer. "That badge is a fake," he growled, stepping forward. Simone didn't flinch. Instead, she tapped her speakerphone. "Can you confirm Special Agent Blake's identity and protection status?" she asked. A crisp reply floated through the speaker. "Affirmative. You have full federal immunity. Stand by for arrival of our team." At that moment, 2 uniformed state troopers moved into the scene, stern faces framed by glossy caps, eyes trained on Carter. One reached beneath his jacket, extracting a crisp document stamped Internal Affairs. He stepped up to Lewis, sliding the notice across the hood of Simone's SUV. The younger officer stood behind him, shoulders squared. At last, his earlier deference vanished. Carter's eyes flicked from the paperwork to the assembling squad cars, FBI agents in dark suits clustered around their SUV doors. His chest heaved as he fought to stem the tide of unfolding consequences. Reporters and bystanders raised their phones, recording every falter of his once ironclad authority. Simone folded her arms, unwavering. The troopers began their questioning, radios crackling with fresh directives. Lewis tried to bark orders, but his voice came out thin, strained. The veteran cop who had targeted a black woman driving a luxury vehicle was now himself under scrutiny, accused of misconduct, abuse of power, racial profiling. His swagger drained. What remained was the hollow echo of hubris undone. As the troopers led him toward a patrol cruiser, hands gripping the Internal Affairs notice like handcuffs, Simone watched, expression unreadable. The spectacle quickened fingerprint statements, official reports in motion. In that instant, the predator had become the prey, and the crooked badge finally bore the weight of justice. Overnight, the story exploded across every screen. Anchors broke in on regular programming to replay Simone's unwavering poise as Lewis Carter relinquished his badge and sidearm, his face a portrait of shock. Street corner interviews showed neighbors nodding in disbelief, recalling routine stops of black drivers in high-end vehicles. Officers who just had a feeling turned out to have a pattern. Social media lit up with eyewitness clips, the same veteran cop demanding credentials, the rookie's uneasy glance, the cameras rolling through Simone's open window. By morning, the state attorney's office announced a formal corruption investigation. Decades of undocumented stops, unlogged complaints, and suspicious behavior memos now lay exposed under subpoena. Citizens who'd once stayed silent called for audits of every traffic stop within the precinct. Local aldermen demanded transparency reports and bias training. At the FBI headquarters, Simone Blake's calm under fire became the standard for leadership. Within hours, Justice Department brass tapped her to head a new task force on law enforcement accountability, an initiative to embed federal oversight into local precincts and champion community review boards. Congressional aides circulated her story as a case study in standing firm under wrongful authority. Meanwhile, the rookie officer, once trembling beside Carter, received a departmental commendation for unwavering integrity, prompting a swift reassignment to a community outreach unit. His name, whispered with respect by colleagues, became a beacon for recruits weary of unearned suspicion. What began as a routine afternoon traffic stop ruptured into a watershed moment. One black woman's refusal to be bullied revealed the fissures beneath the badge. In the weeks that followed, precinct leadership reshuffled, complaint hotlines overflowed, and policy reforms crawled through City Hall. The notion that a single officer could profile drivers with impunity crumbled under public outrage. Simone's steady hand on the speakerphone had triggered more than backup. It launched a reckoning. In quiet defiance, she showed that power, when unchallenged, can collapse under its own weight. A traffic stop wasn't just a citation, it became the spark for justice reasserted. Downtown Summit mayors and aldermen gathered under portraits of founders as FBI HQ's own internal investigators laid out the damning dossier. Dozens of suspicious behavior traffic stops, complaints quietly buried, and a veteran officer's badge shielding years of harassment. Rebecca's meticulous report, cross-referenced with body cam logs and civilian statements, left no room for doubt. Word spread fast. On the steps of City Hall, community activists raised their voices in unison. Accountability, now a chant that echoed through the marble columns. They weren't demanding charity, they were demanding change. In response, the mayor signed an ordinance convening a truly independent citizen review board, empowered to subpoena officers and recommend disciplinary action. Meanwhile, on the south side, churches with century-old stained glass windows opened their doors for town hall panel discussions. Law enforcement reformers, civil rights attorneys, neighborhood pastors, and residents exchanged testimonies. One by one, they recounted near-identical stories of routine stops, black drivers in nice cars, random checks, and lingering fear. The panels weren't lectures, but conversations forging alliances grounded in shared outrage. At the Summit Bar Association's auditorium, Simone Blake, once your typical morning commuter, stood before a room of seasoned attorneys. She spoke without rancor, her voice steady. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom. We cannot wait for courage to find us. We must demand it from every badge and every shield. Her words landed like bolts of lightning in a gathering storm. That afternoon, council committees advanced proposals requiring every patrol car to carry dash cams and live stream footage to a neutral server. Officers would undergo quarterly bias awareness training, and stop data would be public record. It was the kind of structural shift that usually takes years, but Simone's single act of defiance had accelerated the timetable. Back at home over tea and scrambled eggs, neighbors commended her not as a heroine, but as one of their own who simply refused to stay silent. Her routine commute had ignited a policy revolution and awakened a city's conscience. In the days ahead, Summit would discover that accountability isn't a destination, but a relentless journey, and this time the city was prepared to see it through. Weeks into the uproar, City Hall hummed with a new urgency. Under soaring frescoes of Summit, founders the mayor, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled, signed an executive order mandating every one of the city's 12,000 police officers complete rigorous de-escalation drills and quarterly anti-bias seminars. The gallery of aldermen and community leaders watched as pens scratched signatures across the glossy ordinance sealing a promise for real change. Meanwhile, at the State House, legislators crossed party lines to fortify civilian oversight. Debate roared in committee rooms lined with oak panels. Some warned of overreach, others demanded accountability. In the end, a new law passed that any use of force by an officer triggers an independent third-party review. No exceptions. That same afternoon, police union heads issued a wary statement. Yet in precinct lobbies across the city, rank-and-file officers quietly lobbied in favor of transparency, swapping stories of goodwill with wary residents. In Southside churches and Northside community centers, faith leaders convened listening circles, seating officers and neighbors in the same pews. Candles glowed as each side spoke honestly, sometimes haltingly, often tearfully about fear and hope. Academics from the University of Summit and beyond charted parallels to high-profile cases in New York and Los Angeles, penning op-eds under headlines like Summit's Turning Point. At FBI headquarters, Simone Blake reviewed the final draft of her Integrity in Policing Blueprint. Funded by a newly awarded DOJ grant, the initiative would export Summit's hard-won lessons nationwide, pairing best practices with frontline narratives. That evening, local and national news outlets aired a montage, the mayor's signature pen, the State House gavel officers in training, citizens in listening circles, and Simone poised behind a podium outlining a vision of law enforcement rebuilt on trust. A crisp headline flashed from crisis to catalyst, Summit leads the way, as the city lights glittered on the river summit and sensed that something profound had shifted. What began as one traffic stop had ignited a movement, one whose full impact would unfold for years to come. 4 months on the fallout reached its legal zenith. In a packed county courtroom, the indictment unspooled like a litany of betrayal, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and official misconduct. Activists and survivors of roadside profiling filled the gallery's wooden benches, their quiet faces a living ledger of Lewis Carter's abuses. When Carter appeared for arraignment, his once proud shoulders now stooped beneath a crisp orange jumpsuit. There was no triumphant swagger, only the hollow clink of shackles as he was led to the defense table. His former precinct captain took the stand, first holding up phone logs harvested from that rookie officer's secret recording. Every unwarranted stop, every whispered boast of catching another big shot was mapped in time-stamped text messages. Carter's seasoned defense attorney opened with a solemn nod, but even he looked beaten. The evidence he admitted under oath, voice low, is substantial. He paused, then conceded that Carter's pattern of harassment, documented in Simone Blake's chain of custody files and corroborated by dozens of citizen testimonies, left little room for doubt. County prosecutors unfolded Simone's meticulously preserved digital logs on the projection screen. Each badge scan, every dash cam request, Carter had willfully ignored the rookie's unfiltered audio of Carter berating a trembling motorist. The judge's face remained impassive, but his eyes flicked with grim satisfaction as he reviewed the exhibits. When the rookie officer returned to the stand, his testimony echoed across the hushed room. The daily humiliation Carter inflicted on black drivers, the growing sense of dread every time Carter turned on his lights. His courage in coming forward, despite Carter's threats, became the linchpin of the prosecution's case. By mid-afternoon, Carter's attorney walked to the bench and asked for a recess. Minutes later, he rose again, shoulders slumped. "Your Honor," he said, voice barely steady, "my client will enter a guilty plea on all counts." The judge set stringent bail conditions, house arrest, no law enforcement access, weekly reporting, and pronounced the career of a once feared officer effectively over before he ever stepped inside a jury box. Outside, as Carter was led away, the crowd in the gallery let out a silent applause, an acknowledgement that justice, though delayed by prejudice, had at last arrived. 12 months have passed since that rain-soaked traffic stop became a flashpoint. In Summit streets now, every squad car beams live video back to a civilian oversight center, no more mysterious lost footage. Precinct commanders submit quarterly audits of every stop and search. Data flags any patterns of bias before they can take root. Any use of force automatically triggers a federal review, ensuring transparency that once seemed impossible. At FBI headquarters, Simone Blake is lauded for co-authoring a landmark DOJ report on institutional bias in urban policing. Her Summit model real-time streaming data audits civilian review now shapes conversations in state legislatures and city halls, from New York to Los Angeles. Community surveys, once grim, now show a 40% jump in public trust, proof that accountability can rebuild a fractured bond. Summit City Council has proclaimed the anniversary of that fateful stop as Accountability Day. Each year, civic leaders and ordinary citizens gather on the plaza in front of the courthouse to honor those who refuse to stay silent. Last fall, a feature-length documentary debuted at the Summit International Film Festival, its opening scenes replaying Simone's calm speakerphone call and Carter's stunned surrender. Drivers who were once detained without cause speak on camera, some tearful, all resolute, declaring how one woman's quiet courage gave them back their dignity. In neighborhoods on the South Side, block clubs and faith communities hold listening circles, sharing updates on the reforms and planning next steps. Law enforcement academies invite Simone and the rookie officer, now an instructor, to lead training sessions. Even skeptical union reps acknowledge that when justice is seen in action, its ripple effect is real. What began as a routine traffic stop has become a blueprint for change. The Summit of today is still far from perfect, but its streets hum with cautious optimism. 1 year on, the city is learning that accountability isn't a one-time victory, but a daily commitment to ensuring that every badge and every officer serves all residents fairly. In the years since that showdown, law schools and police academies nationwide have adopted the Carter-Reed encounter as required reading. In lecture halls, professors dissect the ethics of a routine stop gone rogue and the rookie's bystander courage. Cadets argue the limits of authority. Law students explore how a single speaker phone call upended an entrenched culture. Meanwhile, civic coalitions partner precincts with youth groups running mentorship programs that bring officers and activists together to rebuild trust, block by block. Across the country, career agents report misconduct early, inspired by that one calm, unflappable FBI specialist who refused to yield. And what of the man who started it all? Behind bars, the once feared beat cop now leads rehabilitation through service sessions, teaching inmates about bias and the cost of unchecked power. On Summit, as Southside murals of the agent in her Navy suit bloom on brick facades, the words, "When courage meets calm, injustice trembles," stenciled beneath. The final verdict isn't inked in court files. It lives in the conversations that continue every who holds power and who holds each other accountable. This story reminds us that every small action can serve as a catalyst for a larger change, and justice will not arrive unless we dare to speak up. The key message invites everyone to share their personal views. Do you agree that calm persistence and evidence carry more power than anger? Leave a comment on how you perceive the situation, and even if you've never experienced racism firsthand, how do you think you would respond if confronted with discrimination in your life? Meanwhile, let's collectively forecast, in your opinion, when will racism truly end? 2040, 2050, or even later? Every perspective contributes to a wider understanding of the current reality and future solutions, because only when community voices are heard can policies and actions move in the right direction. Turn your comment into a small step in the chain of social transformation toward equality and human dignity.